5 tourists were just handcuffed at the reflecting pool for picking up a piece of floating paint. The president calls it a 350-foot gash, cut open with a knife. A wound longer than a football field, he says. But there is no photo, no engineer, no proof anyone outside the White House can find. So I asked the man running the park police the same simple question, 11 separate times. Did this damage even exist? 11 times he refused to say yes, because admitting the truth means admitting tourists are sitting in handcuffs for a crime the president simply invented.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lilly. Thank you for joining me yesterday to discuss the issues that the Interior Department is facing. Thank you for your service in our military. I would like to talk with you about the reflecting pool, as we discussed yesterday. At the moment, the park police are making arrests around the reflecting pool. The president has claimed that vandals, quoting him here, took some form of knife or blade and put a 250-foot-long gash into the beautiful facade of what took so much work, competence, and money to build and complete. He increased the estimate to 300 feet later, then to 350 feet, insisting that it was, quoting him again, cut and powerfully lifted off the surface, leaving very jagged, uneven edges. He was asked what proof there was of any of that, since it doesn't seem to be visible to any other person. And he said, well, you'll have to go see the Parks Department. They'll show it to you, or see the secretary, but I saw it. We have pictures. He also said, you'll see it in court. So you were a police commissioner in Texas, understand it? When people visiting the reflecting pool are being arrested, handcuffed, and dragged away by your police officers, you'd like to think that they have proper probable cause to arrest someone. I grew up in the Foreign Service, and there were plenty of countries in which arrests made to satisfy a political leader's narrative that had no basis in fact was something that they did. The American system of justice has not operated that way. What can you tell me here today about what damage was done to the reflecting pool, where this 350-foot gash came from, and why tourists are being arrested? What is the factual predicate for these arrests?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And indeed, I have spent, as a son of a police officer, as well as a police commissioner, I've spent virtually my entire life in and around the law enforcement industry, or business community, rather.
So you'd agree with me that arresting tourists to vindicate a political narrative, not because of any evidence of a crime, would be a wrong thing to do if that were what happened, correct?
Senator, the U.S. Park Police is one of the most extraordinary and historic police departments in the United States, founded in 1789. And in the year that I've had the opportunity and pleasure and privilege and honor to work with them, I have been amazingly impressed by their professionalism, their training, their discipline, their service, and their duty and service to this district and the people that live here.
Yeah, which is why these incidents seem so aggravating, and I'd like to ask you to respond to
And
that.
consequently, sir, I would say that, and I think that all people would agree, that ensuring that law and order is maintained for anyone to apply, and I'm not saying that you are, that the U.S. Park Police in any way use political motivation to carry out their duties, I think would be unjust, and in some ways an egregious accusation.
So what's the predicate then? Was there in fact a 350-foot gash done by a vandal to the reflecting pool?
The predicate, sir, is that I have no doubt that the police officers involved in the apprehensions of these individuals, of which I believe there were 5, were doing their duty, were enforcing the law appropriately. And I think that all of us should recognize and believe that vandalism of any kind is an affront to civilized society. It hurts everyone.
But Mr. Liddy, the question is, was there vandalism? Did someone cut a 350-foot gash in the reflecting pool? And what vandalism did these individuals do? Is it really vandalism to pick a piece of floating peeled paint out of the reflection pool? People have run through the reflecting pool in the past. The president drove through the reflecting pool, apparently.
Sir, I stand by my statement that the U.S. Park Police operated and conducted their business of protecting this city in an appropriate manner. There was no malfeasance, nor was there any political motivation to it. And furthermore, sir, as you know, this is an ongoing investigation, and consequently, I'm not in a position to share that information publicly. But once it is available publicly, I'm happy to meet with you. I met with you yesterday, sir. I'll meet with you anytime.
Was there or was there not a 350-foot gash in the reflecting pool?
Senator, I stand by my
one now.
I stand by my statement, sir.
Your statement doesn't answer the question.
I stand by my statement, sir.
Okay, don't want to answer the question. I can see why you don't want to answer the question. You're in a terrible position because the president has made up a 350-foot gash, and unfortunately now police officers are being put in the position of having to make arrests that I suspect are going to fare very badly in court because there's nothing about touching the reflecting pool or picking up a piece of floating, peeling paint that amounts to vandalism as a matter of law. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Curtis.
Let me start with the number because the number is the whole story. 250 feet, then 300, then 350. That is how the president's description of this gash kept growing every single time he repeated it. Real damage does not grow with each retelling. A story does. And once a story starts growing in front of cameras, the people enforcing it are the last to admit it might not be true. The Fourth Amendment exists for exactly this moment. It requires probable cause before an arrest, a real and articulable fact, not a feeling, not a press conference, not a number invented on the spot. The Supreme Court settled this standard decades ago in cases like Brinegar versus United States, which made clear that an arrest cannot rest on suspicion alone. It has to rest on facts a reasonable person could point to and verify. Courts have thrown out arrests for decades when officers could not articulate specific facts, only a hunch or a hunch dressed up as policy. That is the entire point of the standard. It protects citizens from exactly the scenario unfolding here, an arrest built backward from a desired outcome, rather than forward from real evidence. So when the senator asked for those facts, he was not being difficult. He was doing exactly what the Constitution requires someone in his position to do. He asked one simple question. Did this damage exist? And he asked it again. And again. 11 times by my count, in 11 different ways. Each time the answer that came back was not yes. It was not no either. It was a wall. I stand by my statement. The Park Police acted appropriately. This is an ongoing investigation. Listen to that pattern closely because it is not an accident. It is a script officials use when both honest answers are dangerous. If he said yes, there is documented damage, he needed to produce it on the spot, and he could not. If he said no, there was no gash, he would be contradicting the President of the United States under oath, on camera. So he chose the only option left to him, which is to say nothing while sounding like he said something. Let me show you why that distinction is not just semantics. 5 tourists are sitting with an arrest on their record right now. Not because a court found evidence of vandalism, because a number was repeated enough times that it started to feel true. The senator made a sharp point here that deserves more attention than it got. People have run through that pool before. The president himself reportedly drove through it. None of that resulted in handcuffs. So what actually changed this time? A narrative changed. And once a narrative exists, someone eventually has to produce an arrest to make it look real. That is not law enforcement responding to a crime. That is law enforcement being used to manufacture proof of a crime that may never have happened. And the people asked to do that manufacturing are not the politicians who started the story. They are the officers on the street, the ones who actually have to put handcuffs on a tourist. I want to break this down into what is actually at stake here, because there are 3 distinct dangers layered into this one hearing. First, there is the danger to the 5 people who were arrested. If this case collapses in court, and legal experts would tell you touching water or picking up floating paint does not meet the bar for criminal vandalism, those 5 people still walk away with the cost. Think about that for a second. A 400-year-old legal standard built to stop tyranny, and the evidence offered against it is a flake of paint floating on water. A night in custody. A lawyer they had to hire. A record they now have to explain. Second, there is the danger to the officers themselves. The senator went out of his way to praise the Park Police, a department with roots back to 1789, and he was right to. But when leadership sends officers out to enforce a number nobody can verify, it is the officers on the ground who absorb the public anger when the truth eventually comes out. That is not fair to them. Third, and this is the one that should worry you most, there is the danger to the public's trust in the institution itself. Every time a federal official refuses to answer a direct factual question, the credibility of the entire agency erodes a little more. And trust, once it erodes, does not come back with an apology. It comes back, if it comes back at all, only after years of consistent, verifiable honesty. The Park Police have over 2 centuries of history behind them. That history is now entangled with a number the president invented and cannot prove. Here is something I noticed listening to this exchange closely. Count how many times the official used the word appropriate, appropriate manner, appropriate duty. That word is doing enormous work in this testimony. It sounds like an answer. It is actually the opposite of an answer. It is a way of affirming the institution while avoiding the one fact that matters. Watch for that pattern outside this hearing too, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It shows up in press briefings. It shows up in corporate statements after a scandal. The formula is always the same. Praise the people. Express concern about wrongdoing in the abstract. Never confirm or deny the specific claim being investigated. Promise transparency at some unspecified future date. It works on most viewers because comforting language feels like an answer, even when it is not one. I grew up hearing stories about places where the government decided who broke the law before deciding what the law actually said. I never thought I would watch the early version of that play out in an American hearing room. But that is what 11 unanswered questions start to look like. Not a conspiracy, just a series of small, careful refusals, each one individually defensible, each one together adding up to something much more troubling. A democracy rarely collapses from one dramatic crime. It erodes through moments exactly like this one. A growing number nobody can verify. An arrest made before the facts existed to support it. An official trained to sound responsive while saying absolutely nothing. A senator who grew up watching this exact playbook abroad, recognizing it instantly at home. None of these things alone looks like a constitutional crisis. Strung together, they describe precisely how institutional power gets misused without anyone ever having to lie outright. So here is the simple test I would ask you to apply. If there really is a 350-foot gash in that pool, the proof should already exist. A photograph, an engineer's report, a single credible witness besides the president himself. Any one of those would end this story in an afternoon. The fact that none of that has surfaced, after repeated public questioning under oath, tells you almost everything you need to know. Until that proof appears, 5 people remain tied to a crime nobody outside the White House has actually been able to demonstrate. And an entire police department's credibility remains hostage to a number that keeps changing every time someone repeats it. That is why this hearing is worth your attention, far more than its strange premise suggests. It is not really a story about a reflecting pool. It is a test of whether facts still outrank a politician's narrative inside American law enforcement. If this story matters to you, do not let it disappear into the news cycle by tomorrow. Share it with someone who still believes institutions check themselves. Watch the full hearing yourself and draw your own conclusion. Ask your own representatives whether they have seen this proof, because right now nobody outside the White House has. Because the next time a number like this gets repeated with enough confidence, you will already know exactly what question to ask.